Week 11 Preface, Into the Mind of the Rift. Volume 4, Children of the Rift. The journey deeper into Vault 43 begins at the edge of certainty and spirals into the unknown heart of the metasphere. Week 11 marks the continuation of the Simulacrum team's evolving story, a blend of high-stakes breach incursions and personal discovery that draws players further into the legend that is Children of the Rift. The fractures left behind by the events of Week 10 have only widened. Breach anomalies swirl dangerously, hinting at more than just vault instability. A lingering presence, perhaps echoes of Callum Rowe's fragmented essence, stretches across the metasphere, whispering in data streams and flickering at the edges of perception. Ramses has begun receiving encrypted fragments that decrypt themselves seemingly at random, pulling snippets of old Annunaki transmissions into the squad's HUD systems. Many of these are fragmented warnings, messages that seem to originate from metasphere vaults long thought sealed. One fragment reads, Glyph core destabilizing. Error 8x93. Anomaly breach detected beyond terminus. Another, eerily personal, simply states, to stand in the rift is to stand reflected. The vaults have mirrors, and not all are kind. The vaults remember. With stabilizers hanging by a thread and ancient Annunaki glyphs reactivating along forgotten corridors, every decision in Week 11 will carve new paths into the Simulacrum's lore. The squad stands at a precipice, not just of breach collapse, but of personal revelation. The shadows in the rift reflect more than vault corridors. They reflect the players. What to expect? Week 11 highlights. Breach reflection events. The vault begins to mirror player choices in unpredictable ways, leading to self-contained breach realities that reshape encounters. Minor decisions ripple into full-scale breaches if left unchecked. The Riftborn Stalkers, new enemy entities drawn from metasphere anomalies, will stalk players as they descend into Vault 43's lowest levels. These stalkers reflect breach-born versions of the squad, forcing split-second decisions between confrontation and stealth. Flavia's last breach duel left behind residue that now manifests as spectral echoes, some friendly, others hostile. Callum's Echo, a critical narrative thread weaves through Week 11 as Callum Rowe's presence flickers within the metasphere. His fragmented consciousness guides, or misleads, the squad as they attempt to stabilize the vault's core. Callum's voice has been heard faintly through vault conduits, and Maxwell theorizes the echoes originate from deep beneath the stabilizer nexus. Narrative focus. Week 11 shifts the focus from external threats to internal reflection and team dynamics. As breachglass corridors spiral into metaphysical anomalies, players will confront not only vault hazards, but echoes of their past and potential futures. Marcus' leadership, Jonah's impulsiveness, and Flavia's duelist instincts will all be tested in ways that extend beyond combat. Between sessions, vault exploration continues in subtle ways. Marcus has been quietly deciphering old vault blueprints during his off hours, while Nick spends time linking breach anomalies to Annunaki metadata. Flavia, meanwhile, has begun experiencing vivid breach dreams, fragments of possible futures that sometimes align with vault anomalies they've encountered before. This arc leans into the concept of player agency. Dice rolls no longer govern vaults alone. Choices ripple through the metasphere, influencing stabilizers, NPC interactions, and the breach anomalies that react to the squad's movements. This week introduces reactive anomalies, events triggered by dialogue choices, gear interaction, and character proximity to unstable vault nodes. Foreshadowing Vault 22's return. As the squad delves deeper, faint signals point toward Vault 22's resurgence. Ramses' cryptic commentary hints at cross-vault metasphere anomalies that intertwine the arcs of the Serpent's Queen with the present. A flicker of breach energy in Vault 43's heart may be the key to unlocking long-forgotten paths, or unleashing dangers best left sealed. Decrypted Annunaki fragments recovered in Week 10 reference something known as the Abyssal Vault Nexus. The name appears across glyphs Marcus has translated, and Ramses suggests this location exists between vault layers, possibly acting as a forgotten metasphere crossroads. Players who explore this lead may unlock hidden vault nodes, creating new pathways for the campaign ahead. Closing note. Prepare for vault destabilization. Prepare for breach reflection. The vaults may yield secrets, but the metasphere never forgets. The metasphere shifts, but the dice remain true. Welcome to Week 11. Game Week 11, Day 1, Children of the Rift, Vault 43, Convergence Engine. Part 1, Arrival at the Vault Gates. 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Martian Front. Setting, Vault 43, Martian Surface, Annunaki Ruins. Out of game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 10 a.m. The studio lights dim as Steve, GM, arranges breachglass vault maps across the table. Bill, Jonah, flips his breach die between his fingers while Michael, Marcus, adjusts his notepad, glancing at the vault diagrams. Jessica, Eva, taps her data slate, skimming vault lore, and Kristen, Greta, tightens the laces of her breach gauntlets. Steve, GM. The rust-laden horizon of Mars stretches out as Vault 43 looms ahead. The entrance stands dormant, half-submerged in scarlet dust, ancient Annunaki glyphs shimmering faintly across its breach-glass surface. Syndicate machinery rusts in the distance, hinting at their failed attempts to claim the site. The gate awaits. Jonah, Bill. Grinning. Nothing like a bit of ancient tech to brighten my day. Eva, Jessica. Clears throat. Brighten your day or vaporize it? Marcus, Michael. Smirking. Let's avoid the vaporizing part. We're here to open the gate, not rewrite history. Greta, Kristen. Quietly, I think history is about to rewrite us. In-game, IG, Vault 43 entrance. The Delvers stand before the breach gate, its smooth black surface humming with faint energy. Veins of breach glass snake beneath their feet, casting pale light as the sun dips below the Martian cliffs. Syndicate dig sites surround the area, long abandoned, but not forgotten. Marcus kneels beside the gate console, brushing away red dust, while Jonah scans the perimeter. Eva paces nervously, eyeing the breach glass patterns with suspicion. Greta watches the cliffs, her blade loose in its sheath. Steve, GM. The gate stands firm, its glyphs flickering with intermittent energy. You can attempt to decipher the Annunaki runes or force your way through with breach charges. Nearby Syndicate tools offer a third option, though their integrity is questionable. Objective: gain entry to Vault 43. Player choice. Glyph decryption. Eva deciphers the Annunaki runes. Breach by force. Marcus uses breach charges on the gate. Syndicate tools. Jonah suggests hacking Syndicate tech. Jonah, IG. Smirking. Glyphs are nice, but I say we knock first. Marcus, IG. Nods. Breach charges it is. Eva, IG. Grimacing. You break it, you explain it to the Annunaki ghost that shows up. Game die skill checks. Vault entry. Scenario A. Marcus, Michael game die, roll, 16, engineering, charges placed precisely along breach glass seams. Eva paces nervously, eyeing the breach. Jonah, Bill game die, roll, 14, perception, spots faint Syndicate movements behind collapsed equipment. Eva, Jessica game die, roll, 15, arcana, glyph patterns partially decrypted, but unstable breach signatures appear. Greta, Kristen game die, roll, 13, survival, tracks unusual reflections in breach glass veins. Narrative progression. Breach gate malfunction. Marcus' breach charge detonates, causing the glyphs to flicker wildly. A ripple of breach energy arcs outward, temporarily stunning nearby electronics. The gate shudders, but remains intact. Eva steps forward, stabilizing the glyphs with residual breach tuning. The gate creaks open slowly. As the dust settles, Syndicate operatives emerge from the surrounding breach glass ridges, weapons drawn but lowered. Syndicate operative. That's a nice vault you're trying to crack. Shame if someone were to claim it first. Greta, IG. Hand on hilt, we found it first. Steve, GM. The breach glass at your feet hums faintly. As the vault gate groans open, the metasphere shifts. You hear distant footsteps and faint whispers from within. Vault 43 breathes. Foreshadowing vault core activity. As Marcus steps into the threshold, his breach scanner flickers to life, highlighting a low-frequency signal pulsing deeper within the vault. Fragments of Annunaki code scroll across the screen. Stabilizer breach detected. Vault integrity compromised. Eva, IG. Softly, whatever's inside, it's waking up. Steve, GM. The gate has opened, but the stabilizer hums ominously. The deeper you go, the louder the breach calls. Next step, continue to Part 2, entering the outer halls. Part 2, entering the outer halls. 12:30 p.m. to 2 p.m. Campaign arc, Children of the Rift, Martian Front. Setting, Vault 43, Outer Halls, Annunaki Subsurface. Out of game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 12:30 p.m. Bill, Jonah, stretches, cracking his knuckles as the players return from break. Kristen, Greta, sketches rough breach glass patterns in her notebook, while Michael, Marcus, reviews the gate schematics. Jessica, Eva, swirls her drink thoughtfully, tapping her foot in anticipation. Steve, GM, leans over the table, spreading out the next phase of the vault map. Steve, GM. Beyond the breach gate, Vault 43's outer halls stretch in both directions, massive corridors lined with ancient conduit systems and dormant breach glass obelisks. Dust gathers thickly in the corners, untouched for centuries. The air is dry, humming faintly with the static resonance of breach anomalies. Marcus, Michael. Scanning the hallways, let's move carefully. Breach anomalies don't like to sit idle for long. Jonah, Bill. Grinning, I'll keep an eye out for anything valuable or unstable. Eva, Jessica. Focusing on the obelisks. These runes, they're different from the gate. I don't like this. In-game, IG, Vault 43 Outer Halls. The Delvers step into the dim vault corridors. Massive breach glass obelisks rise from the floor at intervals, glowing faintly. Ancient piping runs along the walls, leading deeper into the vault's core. The ground vibrates softly beneath their boots, signaling the subtle pulse of vault stabilization mechanisms struggling to maintain equilibrium. Greta lingers at the rear, eyes narrowed as she watches their reflections ripple unnaturally in the breach glass veins along the floor. Jonah traces a finger over one of the obelisks, watching light dance across its surface. Steve, GM. As you proceed, faint voices echo from the obelisks, distorted whispers carried by breach anomalies. You recognize patterns of words, but nothing clear. Ahead, the path splits into 3 separate corridors. One hums faintly with breach energy, another echoes with mechanical clanks, and the third, silent. Objective: navigate deeper into Vault 43 by selecting one of the 3 corridors. Player choice. Breach corridor. Vault systems show heightened breach activity. Mechanical corridor. Signs of syndicate machinery echo down the hall. Silent path. No obvious dangers, but eerie and unsettling. Jonah, IG. Smirking. Breach corridor sounds fun. I'll lead the way. Marcus, IG. frowning, or we could not poke the unstable breach corridor. Eva, IG. Quietly, the silence isn't natural. I'd rather face what we can hear. Greta, IG. Tapping her blade, let's not linger long enough for the vault to choose for us. Game die skill checks. Path decision. Scenario B. Marcus, Michael game die. Roll. 18. Investigation. Identifies subtle vault markings, suggesting the breach corridor leads deeper. Jonah, Bill game die. Roll. 14. Perception. Detects faint footsteps echoing down the mechanical corridor. Eva, Jessica game die. Roll. 12. Arcana. Recognizes breach signatures growing stronger toward the silent path. Greta, Kristen game die. Roll. 16. Survival. Finds signs of syndicate passage along the mechanical corridor. Narrative progression. Path selection. After brief deliberation, the squad follows Marcus' lead, stepping into the breach corridor. The air thickens immediately, charged with latent breach energy. As they proceed, faint shapes flicker in the obelisks, shadowy figures watching from beneath the glass. Steve, GM. The breach corridor hums louder with each step. Vault 43 is not as dormant as it first appeared. The deeper you go, the stronger the feeling of being watched. Placeholder. Major encounter placeholder. Breach anomaly event to be expanded in new canvas if triggered by player roles. Foreshadowing vault systems. Jonah notices faint console panels flickering as they pass, hidden along the walls. Brief glimpses reveal lines of code. Vault 43 stabilizer integrity, 71%. Each step seems to lower the number slightly. Greta, IG. Softly, vault integrity is dropping. We should hurry. Marcus, IG. Quietly, we're already on the clock. Steve, GM. The further you travel into the breach corridor, the closer you draw to the vault's trembling core. Next step, continue to Part 3, the Whispering Chamber. Part 3, the Whispering Chamber. 2:30 p.m. to 4 p.m. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Martian Front. Setting, Vault 43, Inner Sanctum. Out of game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 2:30 p.m. The soft hum of the studio's breachglass table fills the air as Steve, GM, adjusts miniature obelisks across the vault map. Phil, Jonah, leans back in his chair, idly spinning a breach grenade in his palm. Kristen, Greta, highlights notes in her dossier while Michael, Marcus, reviews vault schematics. Felicia, Flavia, sharpens her rift-laid prop with exaggerated flair, earning an eye roll from Brennan, Maxwell. Jessica, Nyx, remains silent, one hand hovering over her dice bag as she studies the map intently. Steve, GM. The corridor leads you deeper into Vault 43 until you emerge into a circular chamber of breachglass and ancient stone. The air is heavy with latent breach energy, and faint whispers swirl around the obelisks that line the perimeter. At the far end, 3 passageways spiral into the unknown. One hums with breach energy, another echoes with mechanical clanks, while the third remains eerily silent. Jonah, Bill. Grinning. I'm guessing none of these are labeled Safe Path. Flavia, Felicia. Smirking. I say we take the loud one. Nothing like meeting danger head-on. Marcus, Michael. Firmly, we're not here to spar, Flavia. Let's see which path gives us the best shot. Nyx, Jessica. Softly, the silent one feels wrong. Maxwell, Brennan. Nods, breach anomalies thrive in silence. If nothing's making noise, it might already be dead. In-game, IG, Vault 43 Whispering Chamber. The team advances into the chamber, the sound of their steps dampened by breachglass flooring. Massive obelisks tower above, their surfaces inscribed with flickering Annunaki glyphs that seem to shift under observation. As the delvers approach, faint shadows ripple across the obelisks, mimicking their movements a heartbeat too late. At the chamber's center stands a dais, its breach light flickering erratically, suggesting instability. The three paths beyond it pulse in rhythm with the vault's heartbeat. Steve, GM. The obelisks respond to your presence. As you draw closer, the whispers solidify into fragmented echoes, half-formed thoughts in ancient Annunaki dialects. Jonah, you recognize faint syndicate markings overlapping with the glyphs, remnants of previous Delver teams. Objective: progress deeper into Vault 43 by selecting one of the three paths. Jonah, IG. Casually, I know syndicate tags when I see them. Someone's been here before. Greta, IG. Tapping her blade, or they didn't make it out. Marcus, IG. Frowning. Let's proceed carefully. Breach corridors are rarely straightforward. Game die skill checks. Path analysis. Scenario C. Marcus, Michael game die, roll. 18. Investigation. Identifies stabilizer nodes along the breach corridor. Nyx, Jessica game die, roll. 17. Arcana. Calms the breach obelisks, reducing resonance feedback. Jonah, Bill game die, roll. 14. Perception. Spots faint movement along the fractured path. Greta, Kristen game die, roll. 15. Survival. Detects residual syndicate energy signatures. Narrative progression. Path chosen. After deliberation, the team steps cautiously into the breach corridor, following the faint stabilizer signatures. As they proceed, the whispering obelisks fade behind them, but shadows continue to ripple unnaturally across the walls. Placeholder. Puzzle placeholder. Obelisk sequence puzzle to be expanded in a new canvas if players investigate the central dais. Steve, GM. Vault 43's corridors seem to breathe, adjusting to your presence. The deeper you walk, the more the air feels like static on your skin. Foreshadowing vault core instability. As Marcus advances, his breach scanner flickers to life, displaying fragmented Annunaki data scrolling rapidly. One line stands out. Vault stabilizer integrity, 58%. Unstable core detected. Maxwell, IG. Cores degrading faster than expected. Marcus, IG. Nods. Then let's make sure we reach it before it fails. Steve, GM. Beyond the next turn, breach light pulses faintly, guiding your way deeper into the heart of Vault 43. Next step, continue to Part 4, Breach Echo Engagement. Part 4, Breach Echo Engagement. For 30 p.m. to 6 p.m. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Martian Front. Setting, Vault 43, Stabilizer Control Room. Out of game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 4:30 p.m. Bill, Jonah, leans forward, eyes narrowed as Steve, GM, places new breachglass markers on the vault map. Michael, Marcus, taps his pen against the table, calculating distances on the grid. Kristen, Greta, adjusts the position of her mini, subtly edging closer to the front. Brennan, Maxwell, watches silently, the flicker of breach light reflecting in his eyes. Felicia, Flavia, flips her dice between her fingers, smirking. Jessica, Nyx, traces patterns on the vault diagram, mapping unseen routes. Steve, GM. The breach corridor ends abruptly at a heavy Annunaki door, flickering with unstable glyphs. Beyond, faint pulses of breach light seep through the cracks. As Marcus steps forward, the door shifts open with a metallic groan. The room beyond is vast, dominated by a suspended control platform bathed in red breach energy. Stabilizer nodes hum faintly, but shadows swirl beneath the surface, distorted figures caught between the metasphere and reality. Jonah, Bill. Grinning. I love a good haunted control room. Marcus, Michael. Sighing. Let's keep it that way. Haunted. Not hostile. Flavia, Felicia. Readying Riftblade. I think we missed that window. In-game, IG, Vault 43 Stabilizer Control Room. The Delvers enter the chamber cautiously, breach light reflecting off the polished obsidian floor. At the center, a towering breach obelisk crackles with energy, anchored to the stabilizer by thick conduits. Shadows drift around it, flickering in and out of focus. As they draw closer, the figures snap into clarity, breach echoes, distorted remnants of Delvers who came before. Steve, GM. The breach echoes drift toward you, flickering like static-riddled projections. Each step closer strengthens their form. One reaches toward the stabilizer node, distorting as it touches the breach glass surface. The obelisk shudders in response. Objective: stabilize the control room by neutralizing breach echoes and reactivating the vault stabilizer. Marcus, IG. Drawing weapon. These echoes aren't just projections. They're trying to influence the stabilizer. Nyx, IG. Softly, then let's disrupt their fun. Game die skill checks, combat and stabilization, scenario D. Marcus, Michael game die, roll. 19, tactics, directs the team to outmaneuver breach echoes, forcing them toward the dais. Jonah, Bill game die, roll. 17, explosives, places breach grenades strategically to disrupt echo formations. Flavia, Felicia game die, roll. 16, melee, engages echoes directly, dissipating 2 with precise strikes. Nyx, Jessica game die, roll. 18, arcana, channels metasphere energy to sever the echo's link to the stabilizer. Greta, Kristen game die, roll. 15, survival, maintains perimeter, preventing echoes from flanking the team. Maxwell, Brennan game die, roll. 20, engineering, reconfigures the stabilizer, halting breach destabilization. Narrative progression, stabilization complete. With coordinated effort, the Delvers suppress the breach echoes. Maxwell's stabilizer console hums to life, and the swirling shadows dissipate as breach energy stabilizes. The room quiets, leaving only the faint hum of the metasphere running through the vault systems. Steve, GM. As the last echo fades, the stabilizer pulses with blue light, signaling the vault's temporary stabilization. But as the breach quiets, a single line of Annunaki script scrolls across the central console. Primary stabilizer online. Core integrity at 47%. The vault is steady for now. Foreshadowing core depths. Jonah glances at the stabilizer display, noticing flickering indicators pointing deeper into the vault. One section blinks red, a warning. Maxwell, IG. Quietly. Whatever's waiting below, it's worse. Marcus, IG. Nods, then we'll be ready for it. Steve, GM. With the control room secured, the path forward leads deeper into Vault 43's core. Breach echoes may have been pacified here, but the vault's heart still trembles. Next step, continue to intermission. Vault analysis and artifact collection. Intermission. Burgers or Chinese loot. In-game, IG lurking in the back of a chamber. 12:30 p.m. The stabilizers hum softly as the breach glass conduits pulse with faint blue light. Vault 43's lower chambers flicker between states of calm and residual breach instability, leaving the squad with a rare moment of reprieve. Marcus adjusts his gear while Jonah idly tosses a breach grenade, catching it with a lazy flick of his wrist. Nyx leans against a rusted vault panel, eyes narrowed as she deciphers incoming data streams. Flavia spins her rift blade absent-mindedly, her gaze lingering on the breach glass reflections that never quite mirror reality. In the metasphere, such discrepancies often mean more than coincidence. Maxwell, cross-legged beside the stabilizer, hums quietly to himself as glowing Annunaki glyphs flicker across his datapad. Out of game. OG. Simulacrum Studios. 12:30 p.m. The table hums with low chatter and the rustle of dice. Jonah, flips through a delivery app on his phone, one foot lazily propped on a chair. Marcus, eyes his dice, rolling them absently as if testing fate. Kristen, Flavia, scribbles on her character sheet while Jessica, Nix, leans over to steal one of Bill's fries. Steve, GM. All right, intermission. Anyone hungry? Jonah. Grinning, I vote Chinese. Or nations. I need a burger the size of my face. Kristen, Flavia. Nations? We'll be asleep before part 5 starts. Marcus. Chinese. We don't have to fight Jonah's grease-laden existential crisis. Jessica, Nix. Teasing, Marcus just doesn't want to stain his dice with burger hands. Jonah. Laughs, I'll get combos. You'll eat it anyway. Steve, GM. Rolling dice behind his screen. Don't relax too much. This vault's not done with you. In-game, IG. The vault's quiet before the storm. Marcus kneels beside the stabilizer, recalibrating breach pathways. The soft hum of the vault feels fragile, like the calm before something greater unfolds. Jonah rests his back against a supply crate, casually tossing a grenade between his hands. Nix approaches the breachglass corridor leading deeper into the vault's heart. As she steps closer, a faint distortion ripples across the glass, 2 reflections flicker beside her own, fading before anyone else notices. Ramsey's voice crackles softly through the squad's comms, distant and flickering. Ramses, AI. Take this time. The vault stirs. A faint glyph pulses along the vault floor, unnoticed by the squad, but marked quietly by the metasphere. The breach remembers. Callum's echo. A voice from the breach. As the squad gathers around the stabilizer, the vault's ambient noise shifts. The faint hum of the metasphere gives way to static, soft at first, but unmistakable. Maxwell's datapad glitches momentarily, flickering between vault schematics and encrypted Annunaki glyphs. Maxwell, IG. Frowning. We're not alone. Something's flickering through the node pathways. Callum. For a brief moment, the sound of static warps into a voice, Callum Rowe's voice, fractured but clear. Callum, echo. Vault integrity at 42%. If you breach further. The transmission cuts off abruptly. Jonah stiffens, eyes flicking toward Marcus. Jonah, IG. That wasn't a glitch, was it? Nix, IG. No. That was him. A residual light flickers along the stabilizer's frame. Maxwell begins to decrypt the anomaly, piecing together strands of Callum's fragmented consciousness embedded in the vault network. Maxwell, IG. His imprints still here, residual data fragments locked in the stabilizer's sublayers. If we dig deeper, we might be able to reconstruct parts of him. Flavia steps forward, her eyes narrowing at the vault's flickering breach glass. Flavia, IG. Reconstructing Callum isn't the problem. It's what else might crawl out of that vault data. A ripple runs through the corridor as the glyph beneath their feet pulses softly. The stabilizer's glow intensifies momentarily before fading back to its faint blue light. Ramses, AI. Proceed carefully. Echoes carry weight. The squad resumes their brief rest, but the weight of Callum's echo lingers in the vault air. Somewhere deeper in Vault 43, his voice waits to be found again. Character progression and loot distribution. Vault exploration shapes the squad subtly yet profoundly. Each encounter, puzzle, and anomaly leaves an imprint on their abilities and understanding of breach mechanics. Marcus has refined his stabilizer expertise, rerouting vault pathways with greater ease. Jonah's demolition antics translate into new ways to disarm traps, occasionally by setting them off. Game die loot rolls. Steve, GM, rolls for item rarity and distribution. Marcus, Michael game die, roll, 17, finds a breach sensor upgrade, increasing detection radius by 15 m. Jonah, Bill game die, roll, 12, gains an explosive mod, adding 1d6 fire damage to breach grenades. Flavia, Kristen game die, roll, 19, acquires a Riftblade modification that phases through breach armor. Nyx, Jessica game die, roll, 14, finds encrypted vault data containing Annunaki schematics. Maxwell, Brennan game die, roll, 20, critical, discovers an ancient glyph key capable of activating hidden vault nodes. Loot is distributed based on roles, with Ramses occasionally offering insight into unclaimed items. Leftover gear is pooled and assigned as needed during future breaches. The vault doesn't just test the squad, it changes them. And they're far from finished. Part 5, Descent into the Core. 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Martian Front. Setting, Vault 43, Lower Stabilizer Tunnels. Out of game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 6:30 p.m. The studio lights dim slightly as Steve, GM, switches to the next vault map layer. Michael, Marcus, scribbles notes, lips pressed in thought, while Bill, Jonah, reloads his breach dice, spinning one on the table for luck. Felicia, Flavia, leans over, nudging Brennan, Maxwell, with a playful smirk as Kristen, Greta, studies breach patterns with quiet focus. Jessica, Nyx, taps her fingers lightly on her character sheet, gaze sharp. Steve, GM. The vault hums beneath your boots, stabilizers faintly online but fluctuating. As the control room quiets, a new breachglass corridor spirals downward, its path illuminated by flickering blue glyphs. You descend slowly, the weight of the vault pressing down like unseen eyes watching every step. Jonah, Bill, grinning, going deeper into the haunted basement. Great idea. Greta, Kristen. Softly, it's not haunted. It's worse. Marcus, Michael. Steady, eyes open. Whatever's down there triggered that core warning. In-game, IG, Vault 43 lower tunnels. The passage narrows, forcing the squad into single file. Pale breach light refracts along the polished breach glass walls, warping reflections as they move. Soft static crackles from Jonah's breach sensor, detecting faint signals that echo behind them. Ahead, a massive stabilizer conduit splits the corridor into 3 distinct paths. Red breach glass veins pulse faintly along one route, while the others remain shrouded in cold blue light. Faint tremors vibrate beneath your boots. Steve, GM. As you approach the conduit, a faint hiss breaks the silence. Anomalous breach echoes flicker along the veins, forming twisted silhouettes of figures long gone. Objective, choose a path to navigate the lower stabilizer tunnels. Marcus, IG. Studying paths, the breach signature stronger down the red corridor, but that means more instability. Nyx, IG. Frowning, instability's better than a dead end. Flavia, IG. Drawing blade, I say we take the risk. Down the red corridor, but that means more instability. Game die skill checks, tunnel navigation, scenario E. Marcus, Michael game die, roll, 16, engineering, scans for vault stabilizer frequencies, selecting the least volatile path. Jonah, Bill game die, roll, 14, perception, tracks faint syndicate footprints leading toward the red corridor. Flavia, Felicia game die, roll. 18. Melee. Carves breach markers along the wall to ensure no path is lost. Maxwell, Brennan game die, roll. 17. Arcana. Channels breach energy to stabilize the corridor as they proceed. Narrative progression. Red path chosen. The squad advances down the red corridor, the breach glass humming louder as the stabilizer node flickers in the distance. Shadows ripple along the walls, mimicking the delvers with unsettling precision. Jonah steps lightly, eyes darting at every flicker. Steve, GM. As you pass beneath a breach archway, the shadows solidify momentarily, a frozen glimpse of syndicate delvers caught mid-stride, as if sealed in the metasphere itself. The vault's memory lingers here, unstable and fractured. Out of game. OG. Simulacrum Studios. 7 p.m. The tension at the table builds as Steve, GM, arranges breach entity miniatures, eyes scanning the players. Michael, Marcus, rolls his breach die thoughtfully, watching the pattern it lands on. Bill, Jonah, double-checks his grenade templates, while Felicia, Flavia, sets her Riftblade mini just behind Marcus. Kristen, Greta, places markers for defensive coverage, and Brennan, Maxwell, narrows his eyes at the breachglass conduits drawn on the map. Jessica, Nyx, slowly cracks her knuckles over her dice. Steve, GM. The walls ripple with shadows that aren't yours. 3 breach entities shift free from the corridor, bodies half-formed in flickering breach fire. Their movements are wrong, jagged, as if skipping between moments. 2 flank the edges, and the largest stands before the stabilizer conduit, its form darkening the path forward. Jonah, Bill, grinning. It's like they heard me coming. Marcus, Michael, nods. They did. Hold the line. Don't give them an opening. In-game, IG, Vault 43 Red Corridor. The air thickens as the breach entities encroach, distortions flickering around their forms. The conduits shudder in response to their presence. Jonah's breach sensor clicks rapidly, indicating unstable signatures circling the party. Steve, GM. The corridor warps slightly as breach glass fractures underfoot. The 2 smaller entities skitter along the walls, bypassing direct confrontation, while the larger one pulses with raw breach energy, blocking the forward path. Objective: survive the breach entity ambush and stabilize the conduit. Game die skill checks, combat engagement, scenario F expanded. Marcus, Michael game die, roll. 18, leadership, coordinates a defensive triangle, forcing breach entities to attack from a single direction. Jonah, Bill game die, roll. 14, explosives, throws breach grenades at the smaller entities, forcing them back momentarily. Flavia, Felicia game die, roll. 15, melee, engages the left breach entity, locking it into combat and carving through its breach glass limbs. Nyx, Jessica game die, roll. 16, Arcana, channels breach energy to form a counterpulse, slowing the forward entity's advance. Greta, Kristen game die, roll. 12, Defense, reinforces Marcus' right flank, intercepting breach tendrils before they strike Maxwell. Maxwell, Brennan game die, roll. 19, Engineering, activates a stabilizer pulse, stunning the larger entity mid-attack and exposing its core. Game die phase 2, entity counterattack. Breach entity, large game die, roll. 17, breach fire surge, unleashes a pulse of unstable breach energy, forcing players to dodge or be staggered. Breach entity, left flank game die, roll. 14, tendril strike, aims breach tendrils at Marcus, testing the defenses. Breach entity, right flank game die, roll. 13, disruption wave, targets Jonah, disrupting breach tech for 2 turns. Game die environmental disturbance. Breachglass fracture. Triggered by roll 4. Steve, GM. Suddenly, cracks spiderweb along the breachglass corridor, cascading in sharp fractures. Shards begin to rain down, creating hazardous terrain. Movement becomes treacherous, and the breach entities seem to draw strength from the instability. Marcus, Michael game die, roll. 15, tactics, directs the team to avoid the shards, minimizing damage. Flavia, Felicia game die, roll. 14, acrobatics, maneuvers gracefully through falling debris. Jonah, Bill game die, roll. 11, reflex, suffers minor breachglass cuts, but continues pressing the attack. Maxwell, Brennan game die, roll. 17, stabilization, reinforces the conduit, halting further fractures. Narrative progression, ongoing battle. Jonah's grenade rattles the corridor, briefly forcing the left entity to dissipate before reforming further down. Flavia's rift blade crackles with breach energy as she parries and strikes, cutting into the flickering form of the second entity. Maxwell's stabilizer pulse forces the largest breach entity to reel back, its distorted form flickering violently. Steve, GM. The conduit stabilizer crackles, responding to Maxwell's intervention. The breach entities twist unnaturally, but they aren't retreating. They're adapting. Game die phase 3 resolution rolls. Marcus, Michael game die, roll. 20, tactics, executes a coordinated push, collapsing the breach entities into one confined area for Nyx to disrupt. Nyx, Jessica game die, roll. 18, arcana, channels breach disruption, dissolving the right entity entirely. Flavia, Felicia game die, roll. 19, finishing strike, pierces the large entity's core with a precise rift blade thrust, shattering its breachglass heart. Loot, post-encounter. Breachglass core, rare crystalline heart of a fallen breach entity, volatile but highly valuable for rift weapon crafting. Obelisk node, uncommon stabilizer data node containing fragments of Annunaki vault schematics. Can unlock new vault routes. Jonah, IG. Picking up core, now that's pretty. Might turn this into something explosive. Marcus, IG. Cautious. Tag it for Maxwell. We don't need another vault detonating. Steve, GM. As the last breach echo fades, the path ahead clears. The vault stabilizer hums faintly, but danger lingers further below. Foreshadowing vault core deterioration. Marcus stabilizer sensor beeps softly, warning of critical energy fluctuations ahead. A thin crack splinters across the nearest stabilizer conduit. Maxwell, IG. Quietly, core's barely holding. If that conduit fractures, we lose containment. Marcus, IG. Grim. Then we stabilize it on the move. Steve, GM. Deeper into the corridor, breach echoes linger just out of sight. The vault's core hum grows louder, like a distant storm rolling in. Next step, continue to Part 6, Stabilizer Rift Convergence. Part 6, Stabilizer Rift Convergence. 8:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Martian Front. Setting, Vault 43, Convergence Chamber. Out of game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 8:30 p.m. The studio lights dim slightly as Steve, GM, prepares the next map layer. Michael, Marcus, rests his arms on the table, eyes scanning the breachglass layout carefully. Bill, Jonah, swaps his breach grenade loadouts with a grin, while Kristen, Greta, sketches glyph patterns in her notes. Felicia, Flavia, spins her dice between her fingers, awaiting the next challenge, and Brennan, Maxwell, double-checks stabilizer mechanics. Jessica, Nyx, silently readies her breach incantations. Steve, GM. The spiraling descent ends at a vast chamber lined with breachglass conduits. The air feels heavier here, charged with latent metasphere energy. At the room's center stands the Convergence node, an inactive Annunaki stabilizer, crackling faintly beneath layers of dust and ancient glyphs. The vault core lies just beyond. Jonah, Bill. Grinning. If it's covered in dust, I'll clean it with a grenade. Marcus, Michael. Stern. No grenades. Not unless we have to. In-game, IG. Vault 43 Convergence Chamber. As the delvers step into the Convergence Chamber, breach glass panels hum softly underfoot. Stabilizer nodes line the walls, flickering weakly. The central stabilizer device pulsates in time with the vault's heartbeat. Cracks spider across the conduits, glowing with faint breach fire. Steve, GM. The chamber stretches wide, but the vault feels smaller somehow. Energy pulses through the conduits, and shadows ripple along the breach glass surface, as if aware of your intrusion. Suddenly, 3 breach anomalies phase into view, tethered to the stabilizer by arcs of unstable energy. Their forms flicker between humanoid silhouettes and swirling breach fire. Objective: activate the stabilizer and sever the anomaly tethers before the convergence collapses. Game die skill checks. Stabilizer engagement. Scenario H. Marcus, Michael. Game die roll 18. Engineering. Aligns stabilizer frequency to disrupt anomaly tethers. Jonah, Bill. Game die roll 15. Explosives. Targets weak points along the conduit, diverting anomaly focus. Flavia, Felicia. Game die roll 16. Melee. Defends the stabilizer by cutting through breach tendrils mid-strike. Nyx, Jessica. Game die roll 20. Arcana. Channels breach stabilizer energy directly into the convergence node, accelerating activation. Greta, Kristen. Game die roll 14. Defense. Guards Maxwell, intercepting residual breach fire blasts. Maxwell, Brennan. Game die roll 19. Rituals. Manipulates Annunaki glyphs to enhance the stabilizer's resonance field. Game die phase 2. Anomaly surge. Breach anomaly. Left node. Game die roll 17. Disruption pulse. Sends shockwaves through the conduits, threatening to destabilize the chamber. Breach anomaly. Right node. Game die roll 14. Rift fire barrage. Fires concentrated breach fire at the squad, forcing defensive maneuvers. Breach anomaly. Core. Game die roll 16. Convergence overload. Attempts to overwhelm the stabilizer, accelerating vault destabilization. Narrative progression. Rift convergence stabilized. Marcus adjustments synchronize the stabilizer, locking the vault frequencies. Nyx's arcane pulse washes over the chamber, severing the tether on the left anomaly entirely. Flavia's blade carves through the breach fire tendrils, preventing the right anomaly from breaching Maxwell's position. Jonah's grenade detonates beneath the core anomaly, briefly scattering its form into breach glass dust. Steve, GM. As the stabilizer hums to life, the anomalies flicker and dissolve into the metasphere. The convergence node stabilizes, sealing breach fractures along the chamber walls. However, faint tremors suggest the core's breach integrity remains fragile. Loot, post-encounter. Stabilizer shard. Rare, a fragment of the Annunaki stabilizer, capable of reinforcing vault defense systems. Breach flame core. Uncommon, a volatile core fragment, harnessed from the anomaly. Can be used to craft enhanced breach grenades. Marcus, IG. Steady. We're close now. The core's ahead. Jonah, IG. Grinning. Save me a piece of that core. Steve, GM. The path forward leads into the vault's heart. Stabilization holds, for now. Next step, continue to Part 7. Vault Core Descent. Part 7. Vault Core Descent. 10:30 p.m. to 12 a.m. Campaign Arc. Children of the Rift. Martian Front. Setting. Vault 43. Core Descent Tunnels. Out of game. OG. Simulacrum Studios. 10:30 p.m. The mood at the table is tense, illuminated by the soft hum of overhead lights. Steve, GM, lays out new breachglass tunnel tiles on the vault map, shaping the descent toward the core. Michael, Marcus, checks his stabilizer notes, while Jonah, Bill, quietly selects breach grenades. Felicia, Flavia, spins her dice with a sharp grin, ready for the next strike. Kristen, Greta, stretches slightly, her blade miniatures lined neatly beside her. Brennan, Maxwell, sits forward, eyes narrowed as he studies Annunaki glyph references. Jessica, Nyx, quietly scans breach anomaly tables. Steve, GM. The stabilizer pulses behind you, but ahead the vault stretches into unknown depths. The air thickens with breach energy, heavier the closer you draw to the core. A narrow tunnel spirals downward, its walls etched with flickering glyphs. The path is lined with ancient conduits, some cracked, others shimmering faintly. It's as if the vault itself resists your presence. Marcus, Michael. Soberly, no turning back now. Nyx, Jessica. Grim. We're already too deep in. In-game, IG, Vault 43 descent tunnels. The squad steps carefully into the spiraling descent, breach glass crunching underfoot. Stabilizer tremors ripple through the tunnel, causing subtle shifts in the walls. Along the path, faint echoes, distortions of syndicate delvers, flicker and vanish. Their reflections appear for only a moment before fading into the conduit veins. Steve, GM. The path narrows, forcing single-file movement. Jonah leads, his breach sensor clicking softly in warning. Maxwell lingers at the rear, stabilizer tool humming faintly in sync with the vault's pulse. You advance slowly, the descent carrying you further beneath the Martian surface. Objective: navigate the unstable descent tunnels and secure safe passage toward the vault core. Game die skill checks. Descent navigation. Scenario H. Marcus, Michael game die. Roll. 16. Engineering. Analyzes conduit stability to guide the squad along the least volatile route. Jonah, Bill game die. Roll. 15. Perception. Spots faint breach glass fractures ahead, warning the squad to adjust course. Flavia, Felicia game die. Roll. 17. Melee. Clears debris blocking the pathway, cutting through breach tendrils attempting to ensnare the squad. Nyx, Jessica game die. Roll. 14. Arcana. Suppresses minor breach anomalies flickering along the walls. Flavia, Felicia game die. Roll. 17. Melee. Clears debris blocking the pathway, cutting through breach tendrils attempting to ensnare the squad. Greta, Kristen game die. Roll. 13. Survival. Marks stabilized points to ensure safe fallback if necessary. Maxwell, Brennan game die. Roll. 18. Rituals. Reconfigures fading glyphs, reinforcing vault integrity for safe descent. Game die phase 2. Random breach disturbance roll. Triggered by roll 4. Steve, GM. As you descend further, a vault surge rattles the tunnel. Breach glass splinters crackle in arcs along the walls, forcing you to react quickly. Marcus, Michael game die. Roll. 19. Critical success. Stabilizes conduits, shielding the squad from breach fire exposure. Jonah, Bill game die. Roll. 12. Reflex. Sidesteps, avoiding minor breach injuries. Flavia, Felicia game die. Roll. 20. Critical hit. Shatters the breach glass surge, severing conduit energy. Nyx, Jessica game die. Roll 14, Arcana, contains the surge to one section, preventing it from spreading. Maxwell, Brennan game die, roll 15, Rituals, diverts stabilizer energy, lessening the vault disturbance. Narrative progression, vault core approach. Out of game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 12:15 a.m. Steve, GM, leans back in his chair as he places a translucent breachglass marker over the vault core map. The players shift forward, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Michael, Marcus, eyes the stabilizer readout, while Jonah, Bill, lets his breach die roll quietly along the table. Felicia, Flavia, leans forward, her eyes narrowing as Kristen, Greta, smirks knowingly. Brennan, Maxwell, reviews Annunaki glyph sheets, while Jessica, Nix, lingers on the vault core diagram. Steve, GM. The vault core pulses violently as you approach, breach glass spires flickering out of sync with the stabilizer nodes. Static fills the air and glyph patterns ripple unnaturally along the walls. As Maxwell adjusts the stabilizer frequencies, a rift tears through the chamber floor. Light bends and fractures, drawing the entire room into a spiraling metasphere breach. Marcus, Michael, squinting, this isn't like the others. Nix, Jessica, softly, we're not in the vault anymore. In-game, IG, vault core to Zion simulation. The vault core chamber vanishes in a cascade of breach light. When the world reforms, the squad stands beneath the towering silhouette of an ancient city. Zion's digital skyline merges with reconstructed medieval architecture. Flickering above the spires is the symbol of the Assassin's Order, burning faintly in metasphere projections. Steve, GM. The breach stabilizes, locking you into a simulation overlay of metasphere Zion, one designed around an Assassin's Creed-like narrative. The streets below ripple with shifting figures, shadows of assassins and Templars caught in the echoes of past digital conflicts. You feel the metasphere pressing against you, as if the vault's core has intertwined with this fractured simulation. Objective: navigate Zion's simulation and locate the breach anchor destabilizing Vault 43's core. Game die skill checks. Zion transition, Scenario I. Marcus, Michael game die, roll, 18, investigation, analyzes metasphere data streams, identifying destabilized vault frequencies in Zion's network. Jonah, Bill game die, roll, 15, stealth, blends into the simulated crowd, avoiding Templar enforcers monitoring the breach. Flavia, Felicia game die, roll, 17, melee, disarms simulated Templar constructs attempting to block the path forward. Nix, Jessica game die, roll, 20, arcana, manipulates metasphere rift points, stabilizing the team's digital presence in the simulation. Greta, Kristen game die, roll, 16, survival, identifies hidden vault nodes disguised within Zion's ancient alleys. Maxwell, Brennan game die, roll, 19, rituals, uses Annunaki glyph work to weaken the simulation's hold over the core breach. Game die phase 2, simulation threats, triggered by roll 5 or 6. Assassin projection, elite game die, roll, 16. A rogue metasphere construct hunts the squad, mistaking them for intruders in Zion's simulation. Templar enforcers, game die, roll, 14. Digital Templars manifest, defending breach nodes and forcing the squad to evade or engage. Narrative progression, Zion Rift exploration. The simulation reacts to the squad's presence, forcing environmental shifts as the vault breach intertwines with Zion's metasphere grid. Jonah disappears into the crowd, evading detection, while Flavia dispatches enforcers with swift precision. Marcus detects breach anomalies linked to the vault core, and Nyx manipulates the simulation's architecture, shaping pathways to hidden vault data streams. Steve, GM. A path emerges through the simulation, guiding you toward Zion's inner sanctum. As you draw closer, the simulation begins to break apart, the vault core breaching into this world as if seeking release. Loot, metasphere rewards. Assassin's Dagger, rare a digital construct capable of slicing through breach anomalies. Grants +2 to stealth or infiltration actions. Templar Seal, uncommon, a metasphere relic that stabilizes breach disturbances by 15%. Jonah, IG. Grinning, I like this place. Feels like home. Marcus, IG. Smirking, you'd fit right in. Steve, GM. As you approach the sanctum, the vault stabilizer pulses urgently. The metasphere begins to dissolve, revealing the vault core once more. Your time in Zion is fleeting, but what you take with you may shape the vault's destiny. In game, IG from metasphere Zion to vault core. The rift dissipates and the time in Zion has ended. Bring them back to this reality. They continue into the depths of the vault. As the squad nears the vault core door, breach fire arcs chaotically across the glyph work, causing a metasphere ripple to fracture reality. The descent shifts violently, hinting at an imminent breach anomaly. As the breach surge dissipates, the descent path widens. The tunnel gives way to an immense antechamber, breachglass spires stretching along the ceiling, converging over a massive core chamber door etched with luminous Annunaki glyphs. Jonah, IG. Grinning, guess we knock. Marcus, IG. Stern, let's make sure we're ready first. Loot, pre-core encounter. Entering the outer halls. Annunaki glyphstone, uncommon, faintly glowing fragment pulled from breached conduits. Useful for enhancing breach stabilization tools. Vault resonance key, rare and ancient key humming with stabilizer frequencies. Grants access to secondary vault routes. Greta, IG. Tucking the key away. No harm in having options. Steve, GM. The vault core door stands silent, but faint glyphs pulse along its seams. Beyond lies the culmination of Vault 43 secrets. Next step, continue to Part 8, Vault Core Confrontation. Part 8, Vault Core Confrontation. 12:15 a.m. to 2 a.m. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Martian Front. Setting, Vault 43, Core Chamber. Out of game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 12:15 a.m. The room is silent except for the rustle of dice and paper. Steve, GM, carefully sets the final breachglass vault map piece, the core chamber glowing faintly under the table's LED lighting. Michael, Marcus, flips through notes, his stabilizer sensor miniature placed near the vault door. Phil, Jonah, cracks his knuckles, reaching for breach grenade templates. Felicia, Flavia, grips her rift-laid prop, spinning it slightly against the table. Kristen, Greta, breathes deeply, her eyes locked on the approaching confrontation. Brennan, Maxwell, scribbles down sigil patterns, and Jessica, Nyx, rolls her breach die between her fingers. Steve, GM. The massive core chamber door groans open with the weight of ancient breach glass, unveiling a sprawling vault chamber. Stabilizer beams spiral overhead, crossing like celestial pathways. At the center of the room, a breach vortex swirls, tethered to the metasphere by unstable Annunaki conduits. The core stabilizer pulses faintly, but glyphs flicker chaotically, hinting at destabilization. Standing just beneath the vortex is a breach anomaly, a towering figure, humanoid in form but glitching, flickering between solid and translucent. Marcus, Michael. Quietly, that's not just an anomaly. It's a guardian. Nyx, Jessica. Grinning. Then let's put it to rest. In-game, IG, Vault 43 Core Chamber. The squad steps into the Vault Core Chamber. The floor hums beneath their boots, and fracture lines dance across the breach glass as the vortex intensifies. Stabilizer energy crackles in irregular bursts. The anomaly lifts its head, faceless, but clearly aware of your presence. Its arms stretch wide, and breach tendrils spiral from its form, locking into the core conduits. The vault resists. Suddenly, breach rifts flicker to life around the room, shifting, moving portals that ripple with metasphere energy. Through the rifts, fragmented glimpses of alternate worlds appear, ancient temples, floating rift cities, and desolate breachscapes. The rifts spiral unpredictably, threatening to collide with the squad. Steve, GM. Breach rifts destabilize, appearing and disappearing across the chamber floor. Each one pulses erratically, threatening to pull anything they touch into other metasphere realms. You'll need to stay moving. Game die skill checks. Avoiding breach rifts. Scenario K. Marcus, Michael game die. Roll. 16. Dexterity. Sidesteps a rift that flickers dangerously close to the stabilizer. Jonah, Bill game die. Roll. 14. Acrobatics. Rolls beneath a spinning portal, narrowly avoiding breach displacement. Flavia, Felicia game die. Roll. 18. Athletics. Vaults over a breach rift that cuts across her path. Nyx, Jessica game die. Roll. 15. Reflex. Evades a rift attempting to lock onto her breach signature. Greta, Kristen game die. Roll. 13. Dexterity. Shields Maxwell, guiding him past swirling breach hazards. Maxwell, Brennan game die. Roll. 17. Rituals. Attempts to stabilize one of the rifts temporarily, limiting its reach. Jonah, IG. Diving past a swirling rift, these things keep getting closer. Any chance they're just friendly portals? Flavia, IG. Laughing, mid-vault. Sure, Jonah. Let's jump into one and find out. Marcus, IG. Grimly, stay sharp. They're locking onto breach signatures. Nyx, keep moving. Nyx, IG. Grinning as she narrowly dodges. Relax, Marcus. I'm not planning on sightseeing today. Maxwell, IG. Concentrating. I can suppress one for a few moments. Pick your path carefully. Game die phase 2. Anomaly counterattack. Breach anomaly. Game die. Roll. 18. Rift pulse. Unleashes a shockwave of breach energy, forcing defensive rolls. Tendril conduits. Game die. Roll. 15. Core reinforcement. Regenerates breach connections if not severed by players within 2 rounds. Narrative progression. Core stabilization. The anomaly staggers as Maxwell completes his stabilizer ritual. Flavia's rift blade pierces the anomaly's core, severing its connection to the vault conduits. Jonah's final grenade detonates beneath the anomaly, scattering breach glass shards. As the anomaly dissolves, the vault stabilizer pulses steadily, restoring integrity. The breach rifts begin to flicker out one by one, though faint traces of metasphere signatures linger, hinting at unresolved connections to distant vaults. Steve, GM. The vortex recedes as the stabilizer hums back to full capacity. Vault 43 stabilizes, though the echoes of the anomaly linger. The glyphs shift subtly, as if the vault remembers this encounter. Loot, post-core encounter. Then we stabilize it on the move. Anomaly core shard, rare A crystallized breach remnant. Grants +2 to breach stabilization rolls for 1 session. Annunaki vault key, legendary, a key linked to hidden vault pathways, unlocking secondary vaults across the metasphere. Jonah, IG. Grinning, that went smoother than expected. Marcus, IG. Steady, vaults holding. For now. Steve, GM. As the vault core settles, The breachglass stabilizer pulses softly. The vault is safe, but echoes of its guardian may linger beyond the metasphere. Next step, wrap-up and XP distribution. Part 9, Wrap-up, Summary and XP Distribution. 2:15 a.m., End of Session. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Martian Front. Setting, Simulacrum Studios, Table Debrief. Out of Game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 2:15 a.m. The vault stabilizer's hum fades as Steve, GM, sets his notebook aside, rubbing his hands together as the players breathe out collectively. The final map tile rests at the table center, breachglass fragments and anomaly markers placed at the edge, signaling the vault's return to stability. Marcus, stretches his arms behind his head, while Jonah, Bill, carefully repacks his breach grenade tokens. Flavia, leans back, spinning her rift blade in slow, satisfied circles. Greta, taps her dice lightly against the table, grinning as Maxwell, finalizes ritual notes. Jessica, leans forward, eager for the final tally. Steve, GM. That was a solid session. Vault 43 stabilizer is holding, but expect ripples when we head into week 11, day 2. Nice teamwork keeping those breach rifts under control. Jonah, Bill. Grinning. I almost jumped into one. Could have been fun. Felicia. Teasing. Yeah, right after the part where we pull you out from floating midair in some metasphere ruin. Marcus, Michael. Rolling eyes, let's try to avoid that next time. Character progression. Marcus, Michael plus 150 XP, tactical coordination and stabilizer recalibration. Jonah, Bill plus 130 XP, crowd control and breach grenade efficiency during combat. Felicia plus 140 XP, precision melee engagement, critical rift defense. Jessica plus 160 XP, rift suppression and breach anomaly countermeasure rituals. Greta, Kristen plus 120 XP, defensive maneuvers and team coordination during breach shifts. Maxwell, Brennan plus 170 XP, stabilizer ritual completion and glyph reconfiguration under pressure. Bonus XP. Plus 20 XP to all players for completing Vault 43 without stabilizer failure. Plus 15 XP to Jonah, Bill, for humor under pressure and not actually jumping into a breach rift. Loot distribution. Anomaly core shard, rare, assigned to Marcus, Michael. Annunaki vault key, legendary, held by Maxwell, Brennan, for future vault breaches. Marcus, Michael. Tucking the shard away, that should come in handy if things destabilize again. Maxwell, Brennan. Holding the vault key, we're bound to run into more sealed vault paths. This might open a few. Jessica. Grinning, or accidentally wake something up. Steve, GM. You'll find out soon enough. We'll pick up next week as you regroup at the vault's entrance. Until then, great job tonight. Next session, Game Week 11, Day 2, Outer Vault Exploration begins.